During World War II, civilian deaths from hunger and hunger-related diseases reached staggering levels, with estimates of 20 to 25 million people perishing outside Europe alone, often more than from direct combat in affected regions. In occupied territories like the Soviet Union, brutal requisitioning, blockades, and deliberate starvation policies, such as the Nazi hunger plan, claimed millions, while in Allied nations like the United States and Britain, mass famine was avoided only through strict rationing and shared sacrifice. In the U.S., rationing began with non-food essentials. Tires were frozen for sale on December 11, 1941, just days after Pearl Harbor, with full rationing starting January 5, 1942, due to Japan's seizure of Southeast Asia's rubber plantations, cutting off 90% of America's natural rubber supply. Automobiles and gasoline followed soon after. Cars halted January 1, 1942. Gasoline rationed regionally from May 1942, all to preserve rubber, metal, and fuel for military vehicles, planes, and ships. This set the stage for food rationing. Every single person, including newborns, received their own ration book. Sugar was cut to 1/2 pound, 8 ounces, per week, starting May 1942, dropping to 4.5 ounces by 1945. Coffee to 1 pound every 5 to 6 weeks, barely 1 wheat cup a day, and over 300 processed and canned items were restricted. Meanwhile, over 20 million households planted victory gardens, producing 8 to 10 million tons of vegetables, up to 40% of the nation's fresh produce. These weren't optional choices. Americans were asked and required to sacrifice through mandatory rationing, scrap drives, war bond purchases, and workforce shifts. Propaganda posters everywhere reminded them, do with less so they'll have enough. This scarcity reshaped every single meal and shopping trip for millions of families. So, be honest, if you could only have 1 cup of coffee every 6 weeks right now, would you ration it like a responsible adult? Or would you chug it all in one desperate sitting and spend the next 5 weeks crying into your empty mug? Drop your answer in the comments. I need to know who'd survive the 1940s and who'd be the first to crack. If you want to see exactly what people actually ate to survive, the clever substitutions, mock recipes, potato miracles, and desperate inventions born from empty shelves, then stay with me. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now to Bizarre History so you don't miss the full story of how ordinary civilians turned hardship into extraordinary resourcefulness. We're about to dive into the ration books, the victory gardens, the American hacks, the British mock dishes, the Polish potato miracles, and even the darkest extremes. Real history you won't find in most textbooks. Let's go. During World War II, rationing became the backbone of civilian survival in the United States. Just days after Pearl Harbor, the government froze tire sales on December 11, 1941, and implemented full tire rationing by January 5, 1942. Japan's conquest of Southeast Asia had cut off 90% of America's natural rubber supply, leaving the military desperate for tires on trucks, planes, and tanks. Automobiles were halted January 1, 1942, and gasoline rationing began regionally in May 1942. This non-food rationing set the template for food controls. The Office of Price Administration, OPA, issued ration books to every citizen, including infants, using a points system. 64 red points monthly for meats, fats, and cheeses. 48 blue points for processed and canned goods. Shoppers paid cash plus stamps. Sugar rationing started May 1942, coffee November 1942, and by 1943, meats, fats, cheeses, and over 300 processed items were restricted. The goal? Prioritize troops and allies while preventing hoarding and inflation. Civilians felt the pinch immediately. While rationing squeezed kitchens, millions of Americans fought back with shovels and seeds. Victory gardens, home vegetable plots promoted by the government, exploded across the nation. By 1943 to 1944, over 20 million households, nearly 40% of the population, planted them in backyards, vacant lots, parks, and even rooftops. These gardens produced an astonishing 8 to 10 million tons of vegetables annually, accounting for up to 40% of the country's fresh produce. Potatoes, onions, carrots, beans, squash, tomatoes, and leafy greens were favorites, easy to grow, hardy, and nutritious. The USDA and Office of War Information ran campaigns with slogans like "Plant a Victory Garden" and posters showing families harvesting in their yards. Beyond food, gardens boosted morale, reduced pressure on commercial farms and railroads, and freed canned goods for troops and allies. Children joined junior gardeners' clubs, learning self-reliance. In cities like New York and Chicago, community plots turned empty lots into productive land. Victory gardens weren't just survival, they were a patriotic symbol of unity and resilience. With meat, fats, and sugar tightly rationed, American home cooks turned scarcity into invention. Ground beef for meatloaf, substituted with mashed potatoes, peas, and condensed tomato soup, creating a vegetable loaf that stretched leftovers into a hearty, protein-balanced meal. Stuffed onions became a staple. Hearty, easy-to-grow onions filled with grape nut cereal, a wheat and barley breakfast staple, for meat-like texture and crunch, seasoned simply as a side or appetizer. Offal cuts like beef tongue, more available and affordable, were boiled for hours, then baked into casseroles with carrots, onions, celery, and tomato sauce for tenderness. Coffee lovers improvised Roosevelt coffee by reusing grounds for a watery brew, adding chicory root for nutty flavor, or postum, a grain molasses malt substitute, to stretch supplies. Restaurants introduced meatless days, and ads promoted walnut cheese patties or creamed eggs over pancakes. These hacks weren't gourmet, they were practical, nutritious, and patriotic, proving that creativity in the kitchen could keep families fed and morale high. Across the Atlantic, Britain faced even tighter rationing from January 1940, relying on imports cut by U-boat attacks. Adults got just 2 ounces butter, 4 ounces bacon/ham, 8 ounces sugar, and 1 egg per week, with meats limited to 1 shilling/2 pence worth, about 4 to 6 ounces. The Ministry of Food promoted mock dishes to mimic unavailable foods, emphasizing vegetables and potatoes, unrationed staples. Mock fish fillets used rice mixed with egg, chilled, shaped into patties, breaded if crumbs available, and fried golden brown for a fish-like texture, stretching protein without actual fish. Bubble and Squeak fried mashed potatoes with leftover cabbage, onions, or scraps into savory pancakes, absorbing flavors from whatever was on hand. These recipes, featured in wartime cookbooks and BBC broadcasts, kept meals varied and nutritious. Housewives traded tips in queues, turning deprivation into communal creativity. Britain's system lasted until 1954, teaching thrift that shaped post-war cuisine. In occupied Poland under German control from 1939, food shortages were catastrophic, far beyond Allied rationing. Land confiscation, forced labor, and deliberate starvation policies left civilians with minimal access to staples. Potatoes became the lifeline, easy to grow, storable, and versatile in a country where wheat, meat, and dairy vanished. Cooks created potato flour sour cream from milk, sugar, and potato flour, whipped into a topping for blueberry dumplings, a rare treat that brought joy to children amid horror. Beans replaced flour in cakes, boiled, minced, and heavily sweetened, often 6 tablespoons sugar, to mask the earthy taste and form a malleable dough. Spit soup, zupka pludge, used excess barley. Husks had to be spat out after eating, hence the grim name. Vegetarian chopped liver stretched traditional recipes with green beans, peas, onions, crackers, and hard-boiled eggs, when available, from small gardens. These innovations, documented in collections like Maria Karpowichowa's Wartime Recipes near Warsaw, reflect heartbreaking resilience in the face of genocide and occupation. In late-war Germany, as Allied bombings and blockades crippled supply lines, civilians and POWs faced dire shortages far beyond typical rationing. Bread, the staple, could no longer rely on wheat or rye alone. In extreme cases, especially in POW camps and urban areas, bakers mixed in tree flour, sawdust from pine or beech, sliced beets, leaves, straw, or other fillers to bulk out loaves. A documented German black bread recipe from the period called for half rye grain, 2 parts sliced beets, 2 parts sawdust, and 1 part minced leaves and straw, baked as usual. This Ersatz, The substitute approach extended to coffee, roasted acorns or chicory, meat, minimal or none, and fats, often synthetic. Sawdust bread provided calories but caused digestive issues, malnutrition, and long-term health damage. Similar desperation appeared in occupied territories and Japanese-held areas where famine killed millions. These measures highlight the war's brutal toll. When systems collapsed, survival meant consuming the inedible. While civilians rationed every bite, the U.S. military was deliberately prioritized to ensure troops remained strong and effective. The armed forces received the best and most abundant food supplies, often called the best-fed army in the world. Combat troops consumed 3,000 to 4,000 calories per day through K rations, compact combat packs with canned meat, cheese, biscuits, chocolate, instant coffee, gum, and cigarettes, and C rations, larger field meals like ham and beans or stew. Meat, sugar, fats, and processed goods flowed first to soldiers and allies via Lend-Lease. Civilians got the leftovers, limited red points for meats, no priority access to canned goods, and reliance on fresh produce or substitutes. This hierarchy was intentional. Malnutrition had disqualified many draftees pre-war, so the government invested in nutrition research and supply chains for troops. The disparity fueled home front resilience. Civilians sacrificed to feed the fighters, turning their own tables into acts of patriotism. It was a clear trade-off. Troops ate well so they could win. Even with strict controls, human nature pushed back against scarcity. Black markets flourished as soon as rationing began. People traded restricted goods illegally for cash or favors, bypassing stamps and points. In the U.S., black market meat, sugar, tires, and gasoline were common. Farmers sometimes sold extra produce under the table, and city dwellers bartered for extras from rural contacts. Hoarding was rampant early on. When a new item was announced for rationing, shoppers cleaned out stores, creating artificial shortages. Sugar and coffee announcements triggered panic buying. The OPA responded with public education campaigns and enforcement, fines, jail time for violators. In Britain, under-the-counter deals for butter or bacon were whispered about in queues. Black markets weren't always criminal greed. Many were desperate families seeking enough for their children. Yet they undermined fairness, favoring the wealthy or connected. The government cracked down with inspections and posters warning, "Black market equals helping the enemy." This shadow economy revealed the limits of rationing. Rules could control supply, but not human desperation or ingenuity. Despite the hardships, World War II rationing delivered unexpected nutritional benefits for many civilians. In the U.S. and Britain, forced emphasis on vegetables from Victory Gardens and limited fats/sugars improved diets for some groups, especially lower-income families who previously relied on cheap processed foods. Studies post-war showed children in rationed Britain grew taller and had fewer dental issues than pre-war generations, thanks to more greens, milk allowances for kids, and reduced sweets. The U.S. government's nutrition education campaigns via posters, radio, and school programs taught balanced meals and waste reduction, habits that lingered. Rationing research advanced food science. Military nutrition labs developed fortified foods, dehydration techniques, and vitamin enrichment that influenced post-war products like enriched flour and canned goods. Long-term rationing reduced waste, promoted home cooking, and shifted cultural attitudes toward food security. Many wartime recipes survived in family cookbooks, and the experience shaped modern sustainability movements, proving scarcity could spark healthier, more resourceful eating. The rationing and resourcefulness of World War II left a lasting mark far beyond 1945. In the U.S. and Britain, many families continued victory gardening and waste-reducing habits well into the 1950s. Some habits persist today in community gardens and zero-waste movements. Wartime nutrition education helped establish modern dietary guidelines. Emphasis on vegetables, balanced meals, and portion control influenced post-war public health campaigns. Recipes born of necessity, vegetable loaves, mock dishes, potato-based treats, survived in family cookbooks and inspired frugal cooking during later economic challenges, for example, 1970s oil crisis, 2008 recession. Rationing research advanced food preservation, canning, dehydration, and fortification techniques that improved global food security. Most importantly, the era proved ordinary people can adapt to extreme scarcity with creativity and community. Today, as climate change, supply chain disruptions, and food insecurity affect millions, World War II stories remind us. Resilience starts at home with what's on hand. Shared sacrifice and ingenuity can feed nations, and perhaps save them. As we've journeyed through the ration books, victory gardens, mock meals, and desperate inventions of World War II, one truth stands out. Scarcity didn't break people, it forged unbreakable resilience. Ordinary families didn't just survive, they innovated, shared, and sacrificed to feed a world at war. Today, these stories remind us that in times of crisis, the kitchen can be our greatest ally. What wartime hack surprises you most, or would you try in a modern food shortage? Comment below like if this history opened your eyes, and subscribe with notifications on. We'll explore more untold tales from the past next time. Thanks for watching. Remember, history isn't just facts. It's the human spirit that endures.